Me to go through the audit report, Brenda, so I can get started if you're ready.
We're totally ready. Let's do it.
Yeah, so do we need to, so we just, do you make it visible, or are you just gonna, everyone has access to it, or?
I shared it with our board. I'll share my screen and I can share it with everybody.
Okay.
So I was just going to kind of paint the backdrop to start. So I'm not sure if all the board members were board members for our last call where we presented the 2019 audit a few months ago. So I just wanted to recap kind of where we ended up at the end of 2019 and where we've ended up for 2020. So for those of you who were around for the last year's audit, if you remember, we actually just issued a few months ago in February of 2021, and that was for the 12/31/2019 year end. So last year it took a little more effort and a little more time because it was our first year doing the audit. UHY, you had a different audit firm doing the audit prior to us. So we were doing the audit for the first time for 2019, and we ran into a few challenges and difficulties with concluding on the capital asset balance and the deferred inflow of resource balance that you'll see in the financial statements on your balance sheet. So as a result of where we ended up last year, we ended up disclaiming an opinion on the audit because we just couldn't get comfortable with those balances, and those are the main balances on your balance sheet. It's basically everything you have. So we disclaimed an opinion, and then when we went to begin the 2020 audit, we had a conversation with Brenda and a couple members of the board. I believe Mayor Johnson and Betsy Graham-Cow were involved in the conversation, where we tried to just come to a place of what we could do to try and resolve those issues. So what we were able to talk through and kind of give Brenda some direction, and she went and ran with it, was resolving the capital asset balance. So as a result of our conversation, Brenda spent a good amount of time and effort researching the land that the organization owns, and was able to obtain some 2018 appraisals that you had obtained, and look at tax assessments and come back to us with a schedule and a calculation of what she felt the assets should be recorded at. So Brenda, if you could go to page 2 of the audit report. So as a result of, page 2 of the actual audit report, so 2 more pages in.
Okay.
The first page of the audit report is pretty standard.
Right here. Okay.
Yep. So if you go to the top there. So what you'll see for 2020 is we are issuing a qualified opinion. And the reason for that is basically what I just said, being that we could get comfortable with the capital asset balances after the research and work that Brenda was able to do. So now for 2020, the only remaining issue that we have is the support for the deferred inflow of resources balance. So because that's less significant than the two combined, we were able to just qualify our opinion this year, which is better than the disclaimer last year.
Yeah, so that means that we're applying all the accounting rules that you should apply. There's just this one balance that we feel still is going to take a little bit of, I'm not sure what other research you can do, because I think you've tried everything you can at this point to resolve. So we're going to have to think about how you can move forward to be able to provide us what we need to issue an unmodified, unqualified opinion in the future. So that's our next step. But the largest obstacle I think you met this year by dealing with the properties. So we were very pleased in a very quick turnaround to pull that information together.
Thanks.
Yeah, the audit really only took a matter of a few months this year versus last year. It took us almost a year, with the challenges, obviously, of what's going on in the world with COVID, but just, trying to resolve those issues last year took a little bit more time and effort. So hopefully you should get the benefit going forward of, we put in that time and effort last year and this year to resolve the capital assets. So it should be smoother going forward. except for the one item that Matt just talked about with, we're still not exactly sure how to resolve the deferred inflow of resources.
Yeah. And it should take us less time too. So we've had to take a lot of time last year, this year. So when you look at how much effort we spent, that should significantly change next year, because I think a lot of that legwork has been done.
And just for the clarity for the rest of the board and the public, that deferred revenue, we're referring to an old housing resources loan that is still outstanding. It's a one-time balloon payment. So it's there. Everybody recognizes it. At some point we'll get money, but we need to be able to make sure that it's on our books in the right way.
Yeah, so if you go to I think now, Nicole, would you want to go to the balance sheet just to show where those balances are?
Sure. So on the balance sheet, you can see what Brand is referring to is the loan receivable, the 111,000 towards the middle of the page. And then our assumption is that deferred inflow of resources somehow relates to that loan receivable balance, but we just don't have the support and information to really substantiate and understand how that was recorded in the past.
Right.
And you can see that the capital assets, the held for sale of 340,000, that's the organization's estimate of how much the properties are worth based on the analysis that was done. Now that's based on, I think, a few years back. So one of the things that we're going to ask you to do is we have to each year have you take a look at what you have and what the values are, and technically should be adjusting that value.
Right, right.
So that's something to think about going forward.
Right. We're going to have a conversation later in the meeting about our disposition policy. And since those appraisals were done in 2018, if we're going to do anything with our properties, we need to have those updated. So.
Okay.
And I think Branda's also probably filled you all in about the unlocatable properties that I think she's still working to resolve.
Yes.
I mean, for our purposes for the audit, we basically, based on the information we have, are able to feel comfortable that they really don't hold any significant value. So that's why we were able to, feel comfortable with that $340,000 balance. And that doesn't include attributing any value to these unlocatable properties that are still under investigation.
Cool. Thank you. Looks like Rebecca has a question.
I was just curious. I know one of those properties, it wasn't that it was unlocatable. It was sort of that it's a sideways piece of land that's like running between some other properties, basically had been a road. And I don't know if I'm not sure if this is the right moment to ask a question about that, but I was planning to ask a question later, but so.
I think, Branda, is that the one that we kind of grouped with one of the pieces of property that you didn't have an appraisal for because it was kind of between those two?
Correct.
So it's been grouped with the other property?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the assumption is, even though it may not have been part of the original appraisal, it's probably really, if you grouped it with those other pieces of property, it probably wouldn't increase the fair value by any significant amount, because it's kind of just stuck in the middle there. It's kind of part of the original appraisal number.
Correct.
Thanks.
So Matt, did you want to go back to the audit report to just highlight those emphasis of matter items?
Well, I think we don't have to. I think we can talk about the statement of income really quick, but I think what Nicole's referring to is that we still have a going concern emphasis of matter, that it's an emphasis. It's not a, if you look at the operations of this entity, there's not a lot of operating activity, right? So you have costs that you have with not a lot of revenue at this point in time. So because of that, you're using cash. So if you look at this cash flow statement, for instance, you can see your use of cash was $20,000 this year. So the idea here is that as you move forward and you have that large grant award that I know is something you're going to be looking to pursue. At that point, you're going to need to consider still your cash flow for that, and there'll be increase in expenses and there'll be the grant money coming in. But for now, you really don't have any other major source of income. So that's why you're using cash. So because of that, we have to tell the readers in the report that there's risk related to that. Now, you can satisfy that by selling a piece of property. So from our perspective, we know you're, able to continue as you are, but you may need to sell a piece of property like you did this past year. So that's something to consider for cash flow purposes. And that's what Nicole's referring to.
Yep.
So Brenda, if you just want to go back one page to the statement of activities.
Yep.
The only thing I just wanted to highlight here was, your expenses are basically just your normal operating expenses, nothing unusual there. You just had the one grant to the city of Hudson for, I think it was a housing resources project. So that's kind of the only thing out of the norm.
Yeah, and just for, again, transparency, everybody, you're paying for my wages as a contractor at this point since we split with HDC. And then those other professional fees are the audit costs. And then of course our insurance for our properties and activities. That's pretty much it. And we know as we have received this new grant, which is being managed with also contracted staff in the city. So there's money flowing around, but let's be clear for everybody that our operating cash is getting quite low for comfort.
Can I just ask, what was the property that we sold last year? I just don't remember that.
No, Matt, I think you were, that was an HDC thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I like to confuse the entities.
Yeah, I know. It happens all the
I'm
time.
sorry. That's right. So, but you have properties that if you do sell them, that's going to help you generate that. Our thought is that you have them available if you need to sell them.
Right.
So Brenda, if you want to just keep flipping through, I think we already talked about the statement of cash flow. Nothing else really to highlight there. Going to the notes, all these notes, if you just keep going through, are going to be standard, just policies that really didn't change from the prior year. You go to page 12, that starts with general budget at the top.
There we go.
Yep, right there. Oh, actually, go back one, sorry.
That's right.
So on this page, the capital asset language did change a little bit, just some tweaks based on the fact that we were able to record them at what we believe is the fair value this year. And then if you go down to the use of estimates, that's where we talk about the fact that, you really should be revaluing these assets at fair value each year if there's any changes. So Matt had spoken to that a little bit ago, just the fact that you need to keep that in mind moving forward.
Cool.
Keep flipping through, Brenda. The next page at the bottom, we have just a section where we talk about the prior period adjustment. So that's the adjustment that we made to adjust the fair value of the capital assets. And we pushed that back to the prior year since, it should have been recorded in the prior year at fair value. It's just, it wasn't necessarily adjusted properly. So that's that 113,552 that you see.
Yeah.
On the next page under subsequent events, that's where we talk about the $1 million grant that you received in 2021. Just alerting the reader that, that does exist for 2021. And while we don't think it's going to necessarily help your operating expenses, it is a significant grant that, helps with your programmatic mission.
Totally.
The loans receivable, there's really nothing new or different there. Same thing with the deferred inflow of resources. We talked about how we've treated that the same basically as last year, and that's the reason for our qualification. Go to the next page, Brenda. Note 5 for the capital assets. Again, we just tweaked the language a little bit for the current year compared to prior year since we were able to conclude there. And then the going concern, which Matt already talked about, is note 8. Note 9, we just talk about the related party transactions, which is your management fee with Hudson Development Corp. Until the relationship was terminated in September of 2020. And then again, we just mentioned the $5,000 grant to the city of Hudson since you're considered a component unit. This is our report on internal control over financial reporting and any non-compliance matters that we identify during our audit procedures. So we do have just one material weakness still regarding the fact that we couldn't, conclude on that deferred inflow of resource balance. Last year we had 2 material weaknesses, so an improvement that we were able to just whittle it down to 1. If you go, Brenda, to the page where we actually have the description of the material weakness, next page. So here we just talk about the fact that, again, we just couldn't get the documentation necessary to conclude on that balance. And, we have a response here that management plans to address it in the future. So it's just a matter of trying to determine how that can be resolved in the future at this point, since we've I think Branda's exhausted most of her resources.
Yeah, I think the only other thing it's not part of a management letter or anything, but we just want to alert you to the fact, one, we're happy that you're setting policies and procedures as it pertains to the property. So that's a good thing. I'm glad you're taking action there. The second thing is, as you move forward and there is more activity and you do work that grant and do more to operationally move forward, because of the limits you have as far as the financial reporting and Branda's role in which she processes. I mean, it's going to be important that you have someone on the board take some type of role and make sure that they're doing some checks on the financial activity, whether it be the disbursements of the checks, whatever you feel necessary. But it's important right now. It's not too much of a issue that we feel because it's so little activity and you have good oversight. But once you start transacting with vendors and contractors and things, just please make sure you implement some type of controls through the treasurer or through the board.
Right. So when we started doing any sort of writing checks or anything for this particular grant, before Betsy, she made sure that I'm sharing all invoices with the entire board, and they're approving them at each meeting before I cut the checks. So
that's good. The only other thing I would add is that someone is getting copies of the bank statements maybe sent to them.
Okay.
Just so, again, I'm just talking internal control perspective. Totally. Sometimes if you're only shown things, you want to see stuff potentially that you're not being shown. So the way you can do that is someone getting a copy mailed or having them have access electronically. Yes, Rebecca?
You can send those to me, Brenda, if you want.
Yeah,
Since
I have
we have
them all,
space to file here.
Cool.
That's what I was just going to ask, whether it would make sense for it to be somebody in city government, since we're doing the projects jointly with the city and all of that. So great.
Yeah, I have everything electronically, and the mayor has access electronically too. But whenever I get them and I reconcile them, I'll just make sure that I have those files and you'll have record of them. Not a problem.
Yep.
And then the other document that I think Brenda just circulated was our required communication letter, which is a pretty standard letter. Nothing really unusual there besides stuff that we've already talked about. So we didn't have any, problems with working with management. Brenda was great and easy to work with, got us everything we needed. And it definitely went much more smoothly this year than last year. And I expect going forward, it'll even be smoother.
Yeah, totally. I've already started implementing processes so that it's much easier for me to, once you open the system where we kind of put all our files, I already have stuff ready for this year. I just put them in. We're good.
Great.
Yeah, the key is moving in the direction. I mean, we like to file things on time, just like you do.
Yep.
So if we can make sure that we're in good shape before the end of the year, and we kind of, again, have that conversation, planning meeting, and maybe, you can get through the analysis you need on the properties. We want to be able to issue it on time. So by March 31st. So that is the ultimate goal. So that's our focus. So if you feel that you want to talk to us at any time to make it, easier to reach that goal, please let us know. We don't have to wait to the end of the year. You can talk with us anytime you'd like.
No, of course. No, I appreciate that.
I think that was
Brandon,
it, right, Nicole?
Yeah, I was just gonna say one other thing. I mean, like Matt said, usually the Paris is due May 30th or March 31st of each year. They actually have extended it. So right now it's not even technically late, your parish report, because it's been extended until June 5th. They keep kind of pushing it back, but based on where we're at today, there's no reason why you can't get it filed, by June 5th at this point. And when you do go to file that, there's just some language that you have to put like in the comments to comment that the reason it's late is due to this COVID exception that has extended the deadline. So you just want to make sure you do that. That way it won't be considered late.
Yeah, not a problem. And I'll do the same thing that we did last year. Once I get everything in there, I could I'll download a PDF of the report so you can look and make sure that everything is being entered accurately. Just, yeah, as soon as we're ready, I'll do it.
Great.
And we're ready. I mean, once you guys approve these, we'd like to issue them next week, right, Nicole?
Perfect.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yay. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's good. Yes. Anyone have any other questions for us then? Okay, well then that was all we wanted to go through. And then once I don't know if you're going to approve them now or what your process is, but
Yeah, we usually do.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the audit report.
I'll make that motion, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Ravonda.
Thanks, Ravonda. All right, there's no further questions or comments. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to leave the meeting now.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Have a
thank
good
you.
day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we move on to our next item, I think we should address the statement that Betsy Graham Crow, our treasurer, is no longer with us. She resigned as of today. So we will be looking to fill that position by the next meeting. So we'll have more information to come.
Right. And just for the public, just so everybody knows, by virtue of being the planning board chair, you also become the co-chair of this agency.
All right. What's next on the agenda, Brenda?
Quick question, does that mean that, so the process of appointing the planning chairs, we just have to wait for that to go down and then that's how that goes?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And soon as that position is filled, I'll do my usual, orientation materials, make sure that there's ABO training, etc. Speaking of which, Ravonda, were you able to sign up for ABO training yet?
I was.
Excellent. Cool.
And I have started it. Not finished.
Okay.
Started.
Okay, cool.
That is on my agenda. I do have a goal to finish it by the end of next week. So
Perfect. Okay, the next thing on the minutes is the April minutes.
I'll ask for a motion to approve the April minutes unless there's any discussion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. I know that we just went over the audit, but now I'm going to share my screen again so that you can see our monthly financials. Most of the money that we're spending ongoing here is of course for our ADNL grant and paying for our audit as well. Our total grant income that we received so far was $84,000. And as of the end of last month, we had spent just under $11,000. So it's ongoing. And again, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I'm asking for invoices for this program in particular prior to our meeting so that we can approve paying them and everybody gets their check all at one time. This is similar to what we already saw in our regular financials. So can I have a motion to accept the financials as well as bill pay?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to old business. So I will hand it over to Sarah Black and Rebecca.
All in favor?
Oh, sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
I was too busy typing. I was task switching. Okay.
Thanks, Tiffany. Good catch.
No one opposed?
Okay.
So we're on, right? Okay.
Yeah, we're on.
So I am supposed to give an update on the ADLN grant and give a brief presentation on the Housing Trust Fund that we are developing this year. Is there anything else, Rebecca? Okay.
I think that'll do it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new people on the call, so I would just kind of take a step back, which is that in October of last year, after almost a year-long research process, we were awarded a $1 million grant that was to fund strategies that a group of Hudson residents and elected officials and local sort of housing experts had designed specifically to try to combat the crisis of racialized displacement that we have in Hudson, displacement of long-term Black and Brown residents. And so it's $1 million, a little over half of it, about $564,000 is going to seed as in plant the seed, a housing trust fund. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. We are also about close to $200,000 is behind a program called Hudson Roots that we started in March. It's an emergency rental or emergency housing relief fund. Not all of that is just fund monies. A lot of it it takes a lot of administrative capacity to make something like that happen. So we have about $140,000 to start with of emergency assistance dollars. And since then, right now I just got a roster yesterday, and we've had about 18 clients and we've spent about $20,000. So some people, that includes payments for back rents. Some people are, that $20,000 includes 6-month short-term rental subsidies that some people are eligible for. So that includes like the projections over the 6 months, as well as help with first month's rent and security deposit for new apartments. And we have 2 outreach coordinators, Surya McGriff and Kaya Payton, who are helping to spread the word about Hudson Roots. But anyone can get started on Hudson Roots by contacting Dave Healy at St. Catherine's Center for Children. And I can post the information about that in the chat. So there's that's about $200,000. And then about $100,000 pays for the first year's salary and fringe benefits for a new position in city government for a housing justice director, which solves a really long-term crisis of a lack of capacity in the city to take action on like organizing our resources across different agencies and within the city towards affordable housing. So we have hired someone. This is a new update. We, at our last meeting, had not yet, but on June 1st, we're going to welcome Michelle Truleau, who's coming to us from, she grew up in Dutchess County, but she cut her teeth in urban planning in the city of New Orleans. So I think she's going to have a lot of relevant experiences just in terms of, it's a different scale, but just in terms of understanding the kinds of like tourism and relocation interests in a city that's like driving out long-term residents of color. And yeah, she's got a master's in urban planning and seems to have a lot of strong and relevant experience. So she'll probably be at next month's meeting.
Sarah, is she a person of color?
I don't know that.
I don't believe she is.
She's not.
Yeah, a part of the interview process. Yeah, good question. And then the last chunk of money that goes towards the affordable housing development plan, which is something we've hired with Pattern for Progress. We've hired them to create a concrete pipeline looking at properties that are in play, developers that would be appropriate for them, and trying to create a tangible pipeline of affordable housing, new construction and rehabilitation projects that we can bring online. So that's the grant. So the Housing Trust Fund, if I can I share my screen? I think I can, huh? Okay. Okay, so you can see that, eh?
Also, Sarah, if you want to send me a copy of this, and I can post it on the city's website so that this material there. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So again, because there's a mix of people who are like know what a housing trust fund is here, I'm going to try to give a stepped back view and then kind of zoom in on a few things that we're preparing as we think about the housing trust fund for Hudson. But what is a housing trust fund? Housing trust funds are really flexible models. It's a model or a framework that municipalities at any scale, whether it's a city, a county, or a state, can develop and tailor to their relevant affordable housing goals. But the key characteristics are that it's a dedicated revenue stream of public resources are dedicated annually towards the fund so that the fund can operate and take advantage of different opportunities in the community to develop, create, and protect affordable housing through a bunch of different potential eligible uses. So it's a dedicated revenue stream. It can also work in collaboration with and receive external funding from things like the Community Development Block Grant, state and federal funds, as well as private donations and private foundations. It is flexible by design. Every housing trust fund looks different. It's meant to, unless you have some sort of overarching state law guiding the housing trust fund, which I don't think we have in New York State, and in states that do, it is generally pretty flexible. So you tailor it to your city, and it's governed by a board, the composition of which is also tailored to your city. So it's a broad framework. It's just a pot of money, dedicated public revenue governed by a board with a set of priority uses. There's a really excellent resource online called the Housing Trust Fund Project. They do all kinds of surveying and create educational resources about housing trust funds at any scale. And this is sort of reiterating, but one thing that I think they say really well is that housing trust funds systemically shift affordable housing funding from annual budget allocations, which can be mutable, towards like a commitment of dedicated public revenue. So that there's not a debate every year about how much is going to go in. It's a dedicated revenue stream, whether it's a proportion of certain taxes or certain kinds of fees or something like that. And specifically, they're not like investment funds. They don't accrue interest, and they're not public-private partnerships. They're pots of municipal money dedicated to public housing. There are 4 housing trust funds in New York State. There are 304 in New Jersey, so you can see the different Rebecca's got a question.
I just wanted to interject. Well, they're not necessarily dedicated. They're dedicated to housing, and
Right.
some of that is dedicated to public housing. Some of that, like literally, to providing capacity funds for the creation of new public housing. But then they are also, for example, used to like fund a position in city government or other kinds of. But it's housing related.
Yeah, I have a list of the eligible uses that makes sense for Hudson later. But the point is that it's reserving a pot of money at an annual reallocation or an annual level that the city can use towards whatever their housing needs are as they determine. And there's a statewide one in New York. There's one in Yonkers. There's one in Battery Park City in New York City, and there's one in Tompkins County. So we've got a range. Okay. The Housing Trust Fund project surveyed across the nation city housing trust funds in 2016, and these were the most commonly reported. They're called eligible uses. So cities create a housing trust fund, and these are the uses that they name are eligible. So obviously, new construction, you can leverage money in a housing trust fund to create deals with developers and financial institutions to get the loan necessary to build the new apartment. So a lot of housing trust funds prioritize that. A similar kind of dynamic takes place with the preservation and rehabilitation of existing both multifamily and single family housing. Again, where it's like gap financing for a project. You can also tailor it towards people, like specific parts of your population, people with special needs and disabilities, the elderly, people returning from incarceration, veterans, et cetera. These are important too, pre-development activities. That's things like feasibility studies, environmental impact studies. These expenses add up, and depending on the developer that we're partnering with, it can be useful to take care of those things so that we can create, say, comprehensive applications for like a bigger federal grant. And so doing that can be quite useful, as well as things like foreclosure prevention, emergency rental assistance, and other forms of direct loans to, let's say there's a landlord who has, excuse me, a landlord who their boiler goes out or they need a new roof and they can't afford to do it themselves. So their options are to sell or to, which would probably take that building out of an affordable context, because at this point in Hudson, property values are so high that you couldn't really buy a building and then roll it into new affordable units very easily. So we can use the money to make emergency repair grants under conditions that the apartments are kept affordable, things like that, as well as emergency rental assistance, like an ongoing Hudson Roots program. And I also want to highlight community land trusts, which are a strategy that a lot of communities do to remove housing from the speculative real estate market communities will set up a community land trust that owns the land, and then the building on top of it can be developed for much less and can be kept affordable. So there's lots of different, it's very customizable is the point. Okay. Philadelphia was a housing trust fund I looked at a lot, despite the fact that their endowment is just way beyond the scope of what Hudson would be able to pull in. But I thought the ratios here were really interesting. So this is from 2018 and 2019, and it cost $17 million to build 300 affordable units. But they also were able to impact a lot of households through these smaller individual expenses, like home expenses and stabilization services that are ultimately pretty useful, as well as a very affordable first time and low income home purchase grant. They were able to help 80 people purchase new homes with only $200,000. So I thought the ratio of their programming was interesting. So across a lot of different resources, like the Housing Trust Fund project and other sort of state guides for setting up municipal housing trust funds. These are the sort of basic steps that you'll see, which is a city needs to determine their need and create a sort of vision about what their affordable housing goals are. They need to make a plan for a board. They need to do a lot of public engagement for both feedback from the impacted communities about what was going to be strategic and good, and making the case to people who might be hesitant to dedicate public revenue towards affordable housing. So a public engagement pays. And then establishing the trust starts with passing a formal resolution. There shall be a trust and there shall be a board, and then to approve bylaws for the trust and start the process by creating an action plan to move forward from there. Hudson's made a lot of progress on each of these goals. It's not necessarily a linear process, but for example, the vision and the need, we are sitting on a bunch of robust studies like the SHAP and ADLN's own research process. We're planning to make a drafts for the board structure, the revenue structure, and the eligible uses in May and June, and hoping to do some robust public education in June, July, in the summer, because we have a goal to have a formal Common Council resolution in September 2021. And Rebecca let me know this morning that the HCDPA will likely want to pass a resolution as well in favor of the creation of a housing trust fund. And then after that, we have to create and approve bylaws and deposit the $500,000 from the ADLN grant in by February 2022. And as far as an action plan goes, the affordable housing development plan that I mentioned that's funded by the grant will likely be the sort of the set of first priorities moving forward for the Housing Trust Fund. A note about board structures, we're gonna wanna ensure that there's direct representation from people who are impacted by gentrification and displacement. We also need development, real estate, and finance experience, expertise, elected board officials and elected officials and members of other boards across the city, and staggered terms. We'll have to determine what makes sense in terms of, does the Common Council appoint people? Do we have sort of a set number of board positions for certain kinds of community groups, et cetera? I'm running out of time, so I'll skip looking at Massachusetts as example. But for example, here's the Philadelphia Oversight Board, which you can see includes council people, planning and city, government workers, as well as people from different community groups. So we worked with Joe Chaika to start with a list of potential, Joe Chaika is from Pattern for Progress, to start with a potential list of revenue sources, which obviously will include major state and federal grants that we can apply for, to work towards bigger projects, like a whole list of homes that might be eligible for a rehabilitation project, as well as the lodging tax, real estate transfer tax, developer impact fees, inclusionary zoning fees, different regulatory fees across the city, the sale of city-owned property, and the city can also always allocate money to go into the Housing Trust Fund, regardless of whether or not it's affiliated with any of these taxes. So the point is to have a dedicated and consistent revenue stream. And the eligible uses that we've talked about, so because we're not going to be pulling in $28 million like Philadelphia, our using the fund towards like gap financing for big development projects, we're going to have to be creative, because $500,000 is kind of a drop in the bucket for for like a $10 million new apartment building. But what we can certainly pay for is the ongoing sustainability of the Housing Justice Director's salary, direct emergency services in the form of Hudson Roots, or grants and loans for emergency repairs for cash-strapped homeowners or landlords, as well as using it towards packages for grants like CDBG, to preserve affordable housing and enable new construction I talked about pre-development costs already, as well as just, yeah, basic and major repairs so that people aren't compelled to cash out and sell their homes. Yes. And in terms of enshrining a racial equity framework into this housing trust fund to ensure that it's hews towards those goals and this original mission of protecting and investing in long-term low-income residents in Hudson. Well, first of all, the resolutions that we pass to create the board and approve of the board, of the trust fund should certainly address the long-term consequences of not having the right city capacity and political will to take action here. And name the ways that the crisis disproportionately affects people of color. Then the bylaws and procedures in the Housing Trust Fund can be tailored to enshrine racial equity and community leadership through the ways that we grade and prioritize projects that comes to the Housing Trust Fund, et cetera. The board composition as well, that's a place to ensure that we have lasting, meaningful leadership from impacted communities, and in the ways that we negotiate permanent affordability standards with the developers that we work with, including if we don't have a community land trust in Hudson, but we could, for instance, prioritize working with a community land trust were one to come to the fore. Partnering with organizations, making grants so that organizations like that could acquire property and maintain permanent affordability. So that's all I have. That was kind of a whirlwind. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me or Rebecca.
That was great.
That was useful. I know that was redundant for people who've been on HCDPA meetings, but that was useful for folks who are just joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Cool. Any other updates or procedural things upcoming in the next month for the grant that we need to be aware of, other than we hired a new person?
We hired a new person, and the end of June is the end of our second quarter. Okay. So we'll have reporting to do then. Okay. Oh, one thing I will say just for the HCDPA folks is that St. Catharines is going to start staggering their invoicing a month back because our meetings are too early in the month for them to prepare a proper invoice. That's why their invoice is a little light this month. They're just catching up from March.
Cool. Thank you for
that. I'm sorry, it's not for you, Sarah, but for something Branda said earlier. I'm curious, did you say that the next chair of the HCDPA is the planning board chair?
Correct.
I don't think that's correct. According to
co-chair.
Co-chair.
It's not even according to your bylaws. The bylaws say the mayor shall appoint an officer to hold that position. Section 2.
We've always
fine. I get that, but yeah. It's not in the bylaws.
Well, that's something that the board should probably discuss then. I mean,
I refer you to Article 6, Section, well, 1 talks about who makes up the board, and Section 2 explicitly says.
If it's in the bylaws, then there's no need to discuss it. That's just what it is.
Thank you, Tiffany.
You're welcome.
Okay, I mean, I'll check that when we're offline and just verify, but I believe you. Yeah, it's.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Hold on, let me take a note of this just to be sure.
Says by the way, the planning commission chair holds the position of treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
Section.
Yeah, that was the chair that Betsy held.
Yeah, and that was something when we were going through the audit that they pointed out. I just always assumed because that was how it shook out according to the way that the board kind of operated in the past. And again, there was a lot of inactivity on this board in the past where it, the mayor as the chair. Yeah.
You're not gonna do that. In the past, some people didn't even know what to do.
Yeah.
Or their actual role.
Yeah.
Or admitting that this is a sister agency to her. All of that. All of those things.
A new day. I think the mission statement of HCDPA, I think is really clear and should be foregrounded in every every decision that's made going forward about like who's appointed, things like that. Like, I don't think the mission statement has been really made.
Please, can we move on?
Oh, wow.
I know this is Ravonda, everyone. Hi, I hate to interrupt. I know it's getting late and we're gonna end. And Brenda, I just would like to bring something up. I know it was brought up in the past when I wasn't chair, when Marie was on. And I would just like to talk about the State Street property, also Mill Street and 1 Lombard. I have a lot to talk about, so I'm not gonna even do it. If you can add it on to the agenda for next.
It's on the agenda. I mean, first, I just wanted to update you on those 666 parcels and where I am with those. And then we'll talk about disposition and what we can do with our parcels. So, and very, very quickly, those 666 parcels that remain that are quote unquote unfindable, I've contacted 2 different title search companies and neither one of them will do the work. So I've talked to legal counsel Victoria and she said, to do some digging around and find the old urban renewal plans. And I did find one in the basement that had a map with our properties on it. So I shared that with Victoria. There's been nothing moving forward just yet. So that's where we are with that. I'm still digging and researching. Hopefully we'll get somewhere. But I think that if just having a little bit of foresight, there is potential that if these properties are truly unfindable, we will have to go to the city assessor and ask for an adjustment in those assessed values. Because if something is carrying a value of $30,000 and we can't do anything with it, there's no reason for it to be sitting at, as we went through with the audit, sitting on our books. So moving on to the next one, which is the properties for sale. Before we get into the discussion, I know that we've got people that are interested in, and this is stemming off the conversation last meeting about garden. I just want to remind the board that for these, we will need to do an updated appraisal. And because the last one was in 2018, we can use the same appraisal company, and and hopefully it won't be too expensive for them to update what they did before and probably a shorter time frame. And then the next conversation that we'll need to have is bid would be for a sealed bid sale, if that is what the board chooses to do. Now, this comes in tandem with other things that are happening, like the affordable plan that affordable housing plan that Sarah just did the great presentation about. Do we want to wait to make decisions about what to do with these properties until we have those plans in hand so that we can act on what has been determined? Or do you want to start the process sooner? I mean,
yeah, I'd like to actually make some kind of a motion for a resolution regarding the disposition of properties and regarding our mission statement, that basically the disposition of properties should be in accordance with our mission statement, that we shouldn't treat the properties like they're somehow separate from our mission, like that, and that they can be kind of, so that they need to be treated. And for anybody who wants to hear the mission statement, if
yes,
you have time, it would be this. The HCDPA mission is to foster and promote services to low to moderate income persons who reside in Hudson and to administer other resources to promote community development. So that's, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, that is, in general, that's usually for the most part, anytime we have disposed of property in the past, it has been with the caveat that it has to somehow fall in line with our mission.
Okay, so if I wanted to make a motion to create a resolution that says that that's how we're going to dispose of properties,
I'm gonna say I agree with you, Rebecca.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna remind you of last night. You can make a motion on whatever you want.
I'm making the
Yes.
motion. This
And
is
I'm
me making-
seconding your motion.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
Um,
and I'm gonna say aye.
okay, I guess we,
Aye. Come on, all in favor. You're getting slow now.
well, am I supposed to say all in favor?
No, not you, not
Okay.
you. You did your part.
All in favor?
Good, good. Aye.
Aye.
Cool.
One more line, Brenda.
Branda,
Brenda, sorry.
that's all right. Okay, so.
Anybody opposed?
No. Okay, cool. So that is, the next step is to get the appraisals updated. Now, when it comes to disposition of these properties, how we do a sealed bid is that, we have to publicly notice it for a period of time. We can do the parcels individually. We can do them in a package deal. It's up to you guys how you want to do it.
well, I mean, I would like to say, I mean, I don't think that I think that what you just said, Branda, about the fact that there are processes ongoing in the city right now that are like quite at there's a lot of momentum to create essentially some plans about how the city ought to dispose of properties, including HCDPA properties, like how the city as a whole ought to behave around their properties. And I think that, it would be really premature to start disposing of large groups of properties. Like, so I'm just making a call for, or like a, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was the point I was trying to make. I just want everybody to be aware that there are several ways that we could package the properties once we have a plan, if that is the board's desire. Yeah.
We have
Which
something
does
to
not
think about.
preclude the conversation today, by the way, just to make that clear. I don't mean to preclude this conversation about this particular property that is already being brought up for today.
Thank you. Something for the board to think about. Can the people present their plans?
I don't know if that's appropriate because when it comes to a sealed bid,
Really?
the board
Even though like,
the board doesn't really consider them until we open the bids. Is that appropriate?
Well, can we just discuss though the process that is required, like, can you just go through what process is required for something like this? Because
for a sealed bid?
Yep.
Yeah, for a sealed bid, depending on what the appraisal rates are, once we get those updated, the board will need to determine what the minimum bid is for either individual properties to be put up for sealed bid, or for if you're going to do a package, like I mentioned, which the agency has tried before. And then we have to publicly notice those for
we write the process, right?
Huh?
We write the process, right?
For 2 weeks?
No, Tiffany said we write the process, but
we have a policy.
I mean, we can put certain
we write the
restrictions
process.
and stuff like that, yes.
Yeah, so we can put contingencies on that sealed bid process. We can say, must, complete by a certain time. We could say that just like you just passed the motion that the use of the property must fall in line with the mission.
Right. Exactly.
Right. For sure.
Yep.
Go ahead.
What's the, my daughter. What's the, sealed bid?
The process?
That's what Rebecca was asking, right?
Yeah. Brenda, if you want to continue.
Sure. So once we determine the minimum bid price for the parcel or parcels in question, We put together the sealed bid package with instructions, and then we have to publicly notice that and to at least 2 different newspapers or outlets for at least 2 weeks. And it's up to the board. It must be at least 2 weeks. And then we set a date to open the sealed bids. And then usually that happens at a board meeting, or we can set a special board meeting, and we open the sealed bids and the board discusses how they want to handle them. In the past, they have gone to either the highest bidder, or it could depend on the type of project that they want to do.
So can I just, at what point do we determine like the contingencies that we want to put in place on this?
I believe that that can be done in that sealed bid package. This is what we want to see. So essentially, who's ever bidding on the process is agreeing to those terms. And then when we go to contract, it gets further solidified. Also, we normally ask for a 10% deposit with the sealed bid.
Can I make a comment?
Sure, Claire.
So this property has gone without recognition for quite some time. And I think that it's important to note that with all the things that have been said in this meeting and the direction that this board is deciding to go, there are local organizations that are doing this work. And I think that's one of the reasons that we wanted to present the proposal, because it fits in line with the direction you guys are already going. So maybe if one of the things that you all could consider is making some exceptions to organizations, or changing in that way, making it easier for organizations that are doing this work. I mean, with the COVID crisis and the affordable housing crisis, I think that a lot of things should be looked at in a different light. I have most of my board here that I think can speak to some of that, but it's something that I would like for you all to take into consideration about changing what that process looks like. This is land that could be of nothing but good use to the direction you all are taking. And there are capable organizations in the community that are looking to do that work.
Thank you, Claire.
And this agency is an agency that supports, like, you know, I know Branda doesn't like the saying, but it was said and it's on record that this is a sister agency to HUD. This agency needs to produce projects and even properties for giving back to the community. You know, we have this community garden that has been neglected for years. And all of a sudden, when the subject matter came about, having use for the community, now all of a sudden a buyer comes about, and it was so strange. So I was trying to figure out how, who told this person all of a sudden about this property. I really would like to know if it was someone from this board, because it's been so many years, not one person even took a peek over there. And now all of a sudden, when we're discussing how this can benefit the people of the community, it's being looked at for sale.
Well, it's not for sale. And that's the issue that I'm trying to say, is that we can make exceptions, and we could say that there are parameters in the sealed bid process for whoever is going to essentially purchase it through the sealed bid process. But we have to follow ABO policy. We can't just change it.
Hello, may I speak, please? Really quickly. First and foremost, the we is the board, not the staff. Let's start there. Like you said, policy. Secondly, I find it very, extremely disrespectful that you couldn't have told us that, there wasn't going to be a full discussion on this. We had a whole email exchange, right?
This is a full discussion. I'm sorry.
Listen,
I have to bring it to
listen,
the
I'm not done speaking.
protocol.
Excuse me.
You're
Ain't no
not
proper
on the
protocol.
board.
You're
He
not.
has the floor.
He is not on the board, and I want to make it very clear. That
Listen, you're in your staff, so I am speaking.
Let's keep some kind of professionalism.
Yeah, I'm speaking. When I'm done, you can speak. Right? That's how it works.
And keep spreading
Thank
this
you.
information. Do it.
Thank you.
I'm doing that with the
Tiffany, let them finish. Let them finish.
Right.
Please.
I'm just trying to make a point. So there was a whole exchange. There's a whole bunch of people here, many of my staff here, staff hours, a lot of resources to come to speak to an issue, right?
Well, you should have done your
I'm
research.
not done
first.
speaking, Branda. So when I'm done speaking, I'm going to give you the floor. Please stop being disrespectful.
Okay,
I am a constituent in this city. I'm a voter in this city.
so am I.
I pay property taxes in this city.
So do I.
Yes, but you're an employee in this
Let's
point.
keep it on track.
You are an employee in this moment. Act like
Keep
one.
this on track.
Tell her that, Mayor
Quentin,
Johnson, 'cause that's the whole
I'm
point.
talking to everybody. Let's just keep this professional, keep this on track. Branda, if you please, would let Quentin finish. Quentin, can you
So
finish your point?
now they're saying it's gonna, well, whatever process it is, it would have been nice to just been like, we're gonna figure out our process. We'll call you when we have a meeting to do that. Right? Because then none of us would have had to be on the call today.
Yeah,
I did do
That's
that.
all.
I agree with that, and I
You
think
did
I
that where?
think there was miscommunication about that, and that's like what we're trying to clarify now. So I don't know if it would be particularly appropriate for you guys to present your bid information now. I mean, it wouldn't be really fair to you guys.
Correct. It wouldn't be appropriate. The problem is that we have an entire organization on a call.
And I understand.
And
I
we spoke.
definitely understand that.
You know what I mean? Like there was a whole exchange with this information, our proposal, our ideas, and everything was great. See you on the call. And we're all here waiting till the end of this meeting, almost an hour and a half long. And there was no notice that we weren't needed on this call.
You're welcome. It's a public meeting. You're welcome to come to the meetings. I have to do my due diligence with the board and explain the procedure. The mayor and former chair, Betsy Gramco, were informed about both yours and the individual. I'm not taking it to the entire board because it's an individual citizen. I don't need to disclose who it is or what's going on. I'm bringing the procedure to the board to ensure that they understand, because the first step is updating the appraisal. Then we have to go to figuring out what the minimum bid is. And then we have to put together the sealed bid package. I don't think it's appropriate to consider your offer, which would essentially be your sealed bid submission, in a public forum at this time.
We agree with
I
you.
do not mean to be disrespectful to anybody, but the policies and procedures are what they are. And I welcome your.
We understand
Okay.
that part. We agree with you that we should not present at this meeting, but that's not the understanding that we had as of last night and the night before last, when we were in an email exchange sharing our information with you. That's the disrespect he's speaking of, disrespectful of our time.
Yeah, and
because
I apologize, not to cut you off, Claire, but I apologize on behalf of the board for that miscommunication. And I think our next move should be to get that updated appraisal so that we as a board can craft how this bid process would look and any items that need to be outlined for the bids to be accepted.
Good.
But
I
I do
appreciate that.
apologize again on behalf of the board.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. And I'd like the rest of your board to consider some of what we're saying going forward when it comes to communication. Yes, we could have dug deep into your policies and figured out on our own that this would not be the appropriate meeting, but we were leaning on the fact that we were having open communication with the rest of your board members, and sometimes common courtesy shouldn't be expected, but we did expect it. And moving forward, I think that that's something that the rest of your board should keep into consideration, especially if this is the direction that you're taking and trying to better the community and reach out to community members that have been long forgotten and felt like they're not a part of this process. We're here stepping up to become a part of this process and again feel disrespected by city officials.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I got a quick question. This whole discussion was about the selling of the property, because I'm thinking from the last discussion of having use of the community garden until that discussion of the property being sold or appraisals of things of that nature. So that's now off the table. Is that what I'm hearing?
Say that again, Tiff. I missed that.
From our last meeting, from my understanding, we were discussing having a specific organization working with another to enhance the community garden for the public
Yeah.
until there is a sale of the garden. So I'm
I think
asking, is that
that's
still
on the table until the sale. So
okay?
as I've told HCHC, I'm willing to partner and be a part of that conversation as much as you need me, so we can get things moving. But once we have a sale, then it will transfer ownership. But that is still open.
Well, let's discuss that today so we can unlock it and have it officially, growing something.
These bids can come from anywhere. No restrictions on where they come from.
Excuse me, Cedric. We're going to send you the proposal, and we will take donations of beds, of people want to build them themselves and come. The whole point is having the community work
I
together.
think he's asking about the bids in general, like who can present the bid to the board. And Brenda, I don't know if you want to elaborate more on that.
On the community garden?
No, just like a bid in general for a sale of property from HCDPA. It can come
Absolutely.
from.
Yeah, they're open to the public. Anybody can submit a bid.
Is that fair?
Is what?
Is that fair?
According to ABO, it's fair. It has to be open to everybody.
You don't know what ABO is.
Authority's budget office. It is the who we answer to.
But that's why I'm trying to suggest that we have, that we take this as the moment where the board will kind of narrow or like define what the uses of these properties are.
Right. That would be again, that would be part of the process. When you have an open sealed bid such as this, we can set the parameters. And let's say, for example, we have a section in the bid process that says, how will your project or development fall in line with our mission? And if we don't like their answer, then we can negate that offer. So, and just to say, like, if there's a private individual that wants one of these parcels just to put up a single family home, then the board has to have a discussion. Is that the most beneficial use of the parcel as compared to what somebody else has submitted? So we have to compare and contrast them.
I just have something quick before I have to go back to work. I'm sorry. So those properties that I mentioned, that has been going on in the past for a while. As I learned being on this board, all these properties, which is amazing. And with HHA, we are trying to do a new develop. And we are trying to have our RFQ completed by June. So I'm just wondering, I know that you've been struggling for a while for these property details and so on and so forth. How much longer do you think that this would take for us to be able to even bring up these properties and the pricing? As I know right now, it's currently assessed at $90,000 for the properties I had mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How do we push forward so we can come up with some type of agreement to have these properties included in our RFQ, which is my major goal? I know you said you're waiting on a woman, Victoria, but I know we've been waiting on a woman for a while now before I was even on this board. How much longer do we have to wait?
I think that, depending on which parcels they are, if they are these 666 ones that we're not sure, that's a different story. If they're ones that we do have appraised values for already, that's a different story. I think that is, we're going to need guidance from authorities budget office on how to proceed, and probably Joe Chaika to see how a partnership with the housing authority and HCDPA can work to do something with those properties.
Okay. Because they have been appraised already.
Yeah, we have to reappraise them.
Okay. All right, so, yeah. Brenda, I have your email. You're gonna be hearing from me before that, because a month is just way too long.
Yeah.
And as you know, I've been trying to just work it. So
Good.
you will be hearing from me. Everybody, thank you for your time. I'm sorry that I have to dip out so soon. Thank you for this amazing meeting, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again next month.
Thanks, Ravonda.
Okay, we were talking about the community garden.
Tom had a question.
Yes, am I muted? No. I just wanted to point out that, of course, you can write this RFP for the community garden in such a way that, you could say you're only putting it out to bid for someone who wants to manage a community garden.
Right.
Okay, I
Thank
just want to make that clear.
Thank
Doesn't
you.
I mean, it's it'd be a short-term RFP until the sale of, I mean, that there'd be a contract drawn up if that's how you want to do it. But again, we need to figure out what it takes, and then I'll have to contact our insurance company because we're not covered for activity on the parcels.
But wouldn't we cover it through our insurance if it was a lease?
HCDPA is only covered for owning empty parcels. They're not covered to have any activity on them.
He's saying, would their insurance cover it if we lease it?
Right, we could do that too.
them?
Yeah.
Yeah, we would do that. But I know Moshi and Tiff were very hard on the proposal that they got done in conjunction with Black Hudson. So
Okay.
they should send that over to Brandon and the board.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's we're gonna say it's easy peasy. I mean, it should be fine. We should probably have our legal people look at it and make sure that it's good to go, and we could post it again. It's that 2-week period to at least post an RFP, public notice it, and see what we got. And since it's growing season, I don't know if you guys would be game to having, if we do get responses quickly, we could do a special meeting to look over the proposals. I mean, depending on what we got.
Yeah, I think that's the best case scenario.
We don't want to plant things.
Special meeting now.
Say it again, Alderman Griega.
Can we schedule this special meeting now?
Sure.
So you guys already have an RFP put together, or you have a response for an RFP for the community garden?
Proposal.
We had a proposal.
You have
That
a
was what we
proposal,
were saying,
okay.
yeah.
I'll have to dig through my files and see if we had any previous RFPs for community garden activity. If not, I'll draft it and share it with the board and see if it's okay. I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult.
Mhm.
Is next week all right for the meeting?
Well, if I put it together and I get it out by the end of the week, we'd have to 2 week to put
Yeah,
out an
2
RFP.
weeks.
So
31st? It'll be 2 weeks.
yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
Memorial Day.
It's Memorial Day, so I mean, would
You want to do the 1st?
June 1st work?
That works. Cool. All right, I'll notice that as well and get everything rolling for that.
So what is, in terms of the question of how to define like the uses of our properties, what's our next step to put that in place so that when we are considering bids, we have like the qualifications that we want?
I'd say that, as members of the board, we're going to have to do some research and look around and see what other development agencies are doing. And maybe Sarah would be helpful here with Joe Chaika, setting out those parameters.
Can you ask the ABO how that works? Would they be weighing in on this?
I mean, the ABO policy, no, they don't really weigh in on that. It's like our policy is our policy. We set it, we follow it.
Okay, so could we address that at the special meeting as well?
You mean we would draft like a resolution about what to do with those properties based on our research? There'd be 2 items to discuss at the special meeting.
Or, I mean, I'm concerned, like if I feel like there's a lot of momentum to dispose of properties. And so it would be good to get this in place.
Mhm.
Whatever you guys want to do.
Rebecca, I will help you draft that resolution.
Okay, great.
Got it.
All
Yeah.
right. Sounds good.
Great. Anything
Cool.
further
Cool.
on this?
Nope. The only final thing that we had was that I became aware through Kamal that we did change the city charter in regard to the fair housing officer. So this agency used to have an executive director that was just automatically the fair housing officer, but since we're operating without an executive director, they took the initiative and changed the charter.
Well, I'd just like to point out the executive director had not actually been fulfilling that role at all.
Yeah.
It was in the city code, but they have not been doing it.
Kudos to Rebecca Wolf.
Yeah.
And Tiffany Griega.
Tiffany.
Oh, and Tiffany. Sorry, Tiffany.
So just for my minutes, that is fair housing officer is a volunteer position out of the city.
No, ADLN funds are going to be paying for it, and then housing trust fund funds will pay for it.
Okay. Okay, cool. Is there, did we post the resolution for that for the city? So just so I can link to it in our minutes? Or somebody.
The mayor's office will have to produce the signed, because it's a, right? Kamal, it's a.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, we can get that over.
Cool. Thank you. Is there any public comment?
I have one quick comment, or question rather. I know in years ago, I was told, according to the laws, anyone running for office for an elected official position is not supposed to put their lawn signs, so to speak, on city property or any agency property. So I would like to know who on the board gave permission to Abdus Mia and Dewan Sassar to put their signs all around inside the property of the community garden. It's all around there and it should not be there. And I know that's against the law.
Yeah.
I would like it removed.
I don't believe anyone gave that authority, but I'll see Dewan. He's in the meeting, in the next meeting that I'm in. So I'll, ask him and Abdus to remove the signs.
Please, because authorities will be called.
I just have one new business. So I met with Habitat for Humanity, their new executive director, last week, and I would like to have them come in and present to us at the June meeting. They want to really be engaged in the housing movement in Hudson over the next couple of years.
Great.
Well, that's great.
Any other public comment?
No. I just want to say to the board and to the HCHC, I also apologize. I just want to make sure that, everybody's, this board is following the correct procedure. That is part of my role. And, sometimes I feel like tensions get high when you think that things aren't happening the way that they should, but I'm here, I'm a wealth of information. I'm here to help you guys and I champion your efforts. I want you to know that. So thanks.
Thank you, Brenda. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Very good. All right,
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
no one opposed, okay.